guys, let's go ahead and get started.
We'll talk more about the.
Yes, thank you.
No, you sound like you're in a good mood. Okay, as long as your elbows not
How's it going?
designate.
Huh?
I'm Liz, that's designate. She's going to stick it.
Oh. Sorry. That's no fun.
You don't listen to her.
We have
I don't remember that. I like
2,
that.
4, 5. Yay, we have a quorum.
Started out.
It's no.
5.
You know,
Yeah, I'll be right.
full schedule.
I'm counting here, and my brain's not counting right. All right. Thanks to everybody for coming. We appreciate it. As you can see, we have one trader in the group.
Let's just call it right out here.
Jim Parsons has been hired away to work at the UT Dallas
Yes.
ERC. So obviously, since he's going to be doing that, he cannot sit on the board anymore. I know.
Oh, Jim, here's your seed. And
I think that will keep him quiet.
No, it doesn't keep you quiet, Dan. It's not going to keep him quiet.
Good point.
So, welcome everybody. Glad y'all could be here. I think we have a pretty short agenda, so we're just going to kind of zip on through this. First one would be a consideration of approval of the minutes from the March 19th meeting. And do we have any comments or any corrections?
I move we accept them.
Okay. Second by Don Bartfield, and all in favor? Aye. All opposed? Okay. Done. The second one is consideration of extending the research deadline for the initial research proposals included in the original ERC contract. And this is basically the ERCs submitted their proposals. They were awarded for these projects. Some of the data, most of the data, it took a while to get everything ironed out. They didn't get the data at the time frame that they had thought they would. And, so what we're requesting is that they go ahead and get an automatic extension. Now, they will be giving us an annual report on where they're at on those projects, but to go ahead and extend those projects on just a whole-scale basis at this point. And go ahead.
So moved.
Okay.
second.
For how long? For
Yeah,
two,
we have
how about a
Decide on a duration.
Okay.
2-year period?
You want another 2 years?
Yes.
How about if we review it next year? Because some of them were 2-year projects, and you've had data for almost a year, so.
Well, the data has only been really available to those projects more recently, especially with remote access to the centers, and so.
Well, that's true.
At least the partners that we have requested an extension of at least a year, but 2 years would be.
2 years is preferable.
So it's August. It would be August 31st of 2011.
Okay. And then y'all would be still giving us annual updates for all the projects. Any,
Dan, will that cause any funding problems?
No, in general, they've just not spent the funds and pushed the projects forward until the data was available. And so there haven't been problems there. If we have 1 year, that might be more difficult in a couple of the grant-funded cases. But I think 2 years will be sufficient. And we'll happily review that. We'll review that, of course, any time that the Joint Advisory Board would like to, and we'll give you annual reports this year as well, showing the actual status of each of the projects.
yeah.
I'll go ahead and amend the motion and include the 2 years.
Okay.
Second on that. But another question. Some of these were dissertation proposals and other, so does that create any problems at all?
These, I think this really applies to the projects that were included in the original contracts.
Right.
None of those were dissertation proposals. They were all either from places like the Ray Marshall Center or UT Dallas or Texas A&M or UT and UT and Texas A&M's partners as well.
Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Okay, the third agenda item is a fee structure, proposed fee structure that all three of the well, I guess y'all brought an initial version to this committee last time and then had made some modifications based on comments. Does anybody have any questions about this one?
I think this reflects a lot of the discussion that we had last time.
Okay. All right. Take a motion to accept the fee structures?
I move we accept the
Okay.
fee structure.
Second.
Second, okay. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Okay, the item 4 is update on Gates funding data that has been added to the data for the ERC. We've run into a little snag. We got an amendment from TWC. However, it has one comment in there that Coordinating Board Legal has seen as an issue, and I assume the ERCs would, is that it would give them the data from TWC, but it would not allow them to make any money with that data. So, which, no grants, no anything based on having that data. So.
I actually think, in looking at the language, I actually think that that's not an issue for the ERCs in that we're constrained to, we're all nonprofits, we're constrained to only recover our costs for actually doing these kinds of activities, and so.
Well, but the way our legal was reading it, and this may be something that we need to discuss further, the way our legal saw it was that you could not even go forward and get grants and that sort of thing that would use this data, which to me would kind of make it useless.
Don't want that to happen.
So that may be something that we need to talk to legal a little bit more about, but that was the way they read it. And that was the issue that they had brought up. And so we're going to go back to TWC again and say, okay, let's get some clarifying. And they may clarify it to where it's just not a profit and that y'all can get the grants. But at this point, we haven't heard that from them. And we want to make sure that everybody has the same understanding before we move forward on that one.
It seemed like their intent was to not allow us to sell the data to third parties, that
And
sort
that's
of
fine.
thing. And so,
Sure.
Yeah.
we don't want to be in that business anyway.
Yeah. And it may just be we have a very strict interpretation on this end. But if we can get it clarified so that there are no other ways of interpreting it, then that will make everything a little bit better. So that's where we're at on the TWC data. We have added the SBIC data. We've added the Independence College's data. We're working with ACT, bugging them on a regular basis, and it's at their legal office. We think everything's in agreement on the ACT. SAT, we're still having discussions back and forth with SAT. So that's where we're at. We actually have for the first time a Data Fellows program where we have representatives from the Big 8 school districts are in, and Nettie actually presented Monday some information to the Data Fellows about the ERCs and how y'all work and that sort of thing. And there seems to be some good discussions going on. And they're learning from each other and also what's already available and what can be available, and then, like I said, what can be done with the ERC data. And so I think we're moving right along. We'll have another one in a couple of weeks.
Okay.
So that's kind of the update on the ERCs, or on the Gates Foundation. The next one is the new research proposals, and we only have 2 from UT Dallas. And so, Dan, I'll let you. Who?
Kristen is, you all
Benedict.
may know Kristen Kuhn. She manages our evaluation division in our Texas Schools project and is here representing the 2 projects that we have.
Okay.
One of these, the first one is a project that we've requested funding from. Actually, they've agreed to fund this project, the Texas Instruments Foundation. It's a project, and well, Kristen, you tell them more. So, well, I can tell them, and you can correct me, or you can just tell them what their information. And go ahead. Why don't you tell them what Infinity's about?
Oh, okay. The TI Foundation came to us with the executive director for the Infinity Project, which is housed at the SMU Lyle School of Engineering, and they wanted to look at the relationship between program participation for this engineering curriculum, as well as some of the more immediate program outcomes, short-term outcomes that we can get our hands on right now. We only have 3 years of data. I know you guys have seen the proposal, so I don't want to be too repeat myself too much here, but I'll hit the high points. We have 2005 through 2008 data on that program, and so that's why we're just looking at short-term measures. You know, obviously this is just the first hit, the first pass at it, and they would really like to look at longer-term measures in college-going behavior, and, you know, ultimately workforce outcomes if we can ever get the TWC data
Well,
worked
if
out
we can get
right.
this clarified,
Yeah.
it's ready to go. It's a matter of moving the switch, but
So this is just the first step that they would like to make. Let's see. We recognize that there are some caveats that we have to do when we are explaining these relationships with this particular client. Obviously, there are some selection effects. It's an elective course. And so we were going to use in 8th grade, a measure of an 8th grade TAC score in math as a control for the student's native ability. Let's see, what else can I tell you?
What do you have for questions? It's as Kristen indicates, this is the kind of the first shot at a preliminary evaluation of their initiative. What does Infinity do?
Oh, I'm so sorry. Yeah, it's a curriculum, actually. It's a really neat curriculum, and they do 35 hours of teacher training during the summer, and then it can be a standalone course or it can augment existing courses. And it's really intended, it was written by engineers, so it was professors of engineering and TI Foundation people that actually wrote up this curriculum, and it was meant to kind of spark student interest and show students how they can apply math and science concepts to real-world engineering applications. And so they have a hands-on component, they have this technical component, as well as the coursework. There's a textbook that they've developed to go along with it, and they just want some understanding of how it's working and if it's working.
Go ahead.
No, I was going to say, I love this study. I thought, I want to know how it turns out immediately. So I was really excited about it, and I just had really just one thought, and this is probably beyond what you're going to do with this first swipe, but I noticed that you had mentioned that you were going to control for things like socioeconomic status. At some point in the not-too-distant future, I just think it would be fun, especially since the National Science Foundation is concerned about kids with disabilities and kids who speak a second language. I thought if the sample size is large enough, it would be nice at some point after this to disaggregate those data, looking at gender and disability and English language learner status, race, ethnicity, just to see if the trends for the aggregate group hold up for these subpopulations. So
Right.
that, but I love
Consider it done. We'll include that in the analysis.
Yeah.
Great
So, but I love the study.
Great, thank you.
Yeah, I'd like to just reinforce that. I think it's a great study. The 8th grade tax test scores that you're going to be using, are you going to use the aggregate of the first two administrations, or are you just going to use the first administration as a starting point? Because if you use both of them, it seems like it might be a little inflated as far as the results.
Right. We haven't, as far as I know, in all the research that we've done at the Texas School Project, we use the initial administration scores.
That would make sense, yeah.
Those are the best ones to use for a raw measure of ability, I think. Performance.
That's good.
How are students selected for the Infinity curriculum?
It's an elective course. And so they're definitely self-selected into this course, but I think the thing that makes this interesting and gives it so much potential is that Infinity was just approved by the State Board of Education. Well, I'm sorry, engineering courses were just approved by the State Board of Education to be counted as science credits. So as we move into that 4x4 requirement, a course like this could be counted towards a science credit. So it'll move them from elective status to core credit status.
Yeah. Now, when students apply to take the curriculum, and somebody selects them, right?
Well, no, they just have to have, I think it's Algebra 2 and 1 previous science credit in order to sign up for the class, but it's an elective, anybody can sign up for it.
But is there a size limit to, like, can they only have 35 students, or do you even know? I mean, do
You know
they
what,
teach it multiple times? I mean, there's all sorts of size limitations where somebody's going to have to start picking.
Right. My understanding from talking to the program director, and I can certainly ask that question of her, is that there's usually one teacher on a campus that offers this class. And I'm pretty sure it's a year-round class. So
Okay.
both semesters, both fall and spring semesters.
Okay.
Yeah, we're very concerned about those selection issues as well, and of course, any reports we produce will include that as a concern and something that needs to be studied further, I'm sure.
Right.
But we try to control some for selection just based on student prior characteristics, including their academic characteristics, of course.
I was just going to add to that, I'm on the You Teach Engineering grant, and one of the things about some of these Project Lead the Way and Infinity is that they may have, say, an engineering academy at a high school, so that's sometimes where the selection actually is an issue, because they do select certain people into that academy that then get this curriculum.
Yeah.
But other than, but if it's just one course that anybody can sign up for, it's more the prerequisites that determine whether they're going to be in it or not.
Okay. And could you speak, Kristen, to the question of the limit of the public data that you will be using for this study? What is the frame from which these data will be selected?
We are hoping to use, and the teachers have identified for us, the Infinity program director has gone back to the teachers that have been trained to offer this course and said, what PEAMS course code are you using on your campus to offer this class? And so we're going to then create a de facto kind of student-teacher link by looking at the course code in the staff files and the course code in the course completion files.
So the students are actually identified in the data, in the TEA data already, the students who are taking these courses, which was, we had no idea that was true when we started talking with TI about it.
Yeah, and they'll all come from the same district.
No, I'm sorry. They're actually in 35 different districts across Texas, and they've expanded the program into, a dozen states already.
But the analysis will include fixed effects for campus and for district and campus as well. We'll do statewide and then narrow it down to just those districts that have. This is what I'm thinking anyway. Narrow it down to just those districts that have Infinity and compare against all other students, and then narrow it down to the campuses that actually that offer this course compared to other courses. And so we'll be able to make sure to validate that the results hold for all three levels.
Okay, so now when you finish, you'll have how many cases when you have your data set?
You know what? We were able to look at 1 year in our data, and I think I thought I put this chart in here. I may be looking at the wrong proposal at this point. I think we came up with. Let me look.
Are you thinking about the one on page 10?
1,500.
Yeah. Yes. And that was just looking in 1 year using one PEAMS code. And we actually have more complete listing of PEAMS codes now, and we'll have more years of data to look at.
So a couple of thousand students.
Yes.
The only thing that I had a question about is it looks like the research questions at this point mostly are looking at the high school experience of these students that have taken the class, and of course I'd be interested in then, and I'm assuming that's then the phase 2 or phase 3 even of this that hasn't even gone to, is then looking at their college experience. Are they actually moving on to then getting into a science or engineering or math kind of program, is
And
this,
staying in it.
yeah, and staying
Because we have a lot of them that start out in engineering, but by year
move.
2,
yeah.
they're not in the STEM fields anymore. They still graduate at a mature rate, but they just are not graduating in math and science and engineering and stuff.
But I think the first, the first set of research questions, obviously are very interesting. And what is this doing for their high school career? Is it keeping them on track? Is it getting them to graduate? That type of thing. But then obviously looking at then what happens to them as they move on. But yeah, no, I thought the study was fun.
This, for your information, this is kind of a test drive by the Texas Instruments Foundation. They have 2 other major projects that they want to, for which they want us to do some evaluations as well. But their engineers, meeting with them, they want to see your Gantt charts and how much slack do you have in this project and all of that stuff. But anyway, this is a starter, kind of a starter project for working with the Texas Instruments Foundation. I think it sets a great precedent for those other foundations in the state that have invested so much in public education to start encouraging them to do analyses of their programs and to build those into their actual funding when they start the programs. When we met with TI, we told them, this is something you really need to consider when you construct one of these programs. Let's plan the evaluation now. Let's set aside some funds for it and all of that. And so we're beginning to see foundations want to do this sort of activity like this.
I'm just a little bit slow. I'm catching up a bit, but in response to the question on the size of the data, the number of cases you'll have in the data, is the response to that this table on page 10? That's not it.
We actually will have 3 years that we can look at. We just kind of went in and preliminarily looked using one PEIMS course code. So I would say at a minimum we'll have 1,000 students for each of those 3 years that actually took the course credit. I mean, that's just me guesstimating based on what we were able to see in the data so far.
And a campus count?
I think 22 campuses is where we found that.
In 2008, right? So what is it? Can you say what a campus count is really? I mean,
I'm sorry. Right. So they had the data they were able to provide for us was like the campus and the teacher name and the PEIMS code. And so then we were able to take that and kind of go look and say how many students can we find that were in each of those teachers' classrooms. And those teachers were across 22 different campuses. So this course was offered in 22 different campuses for the year that we looked at.
Okay. So SMU would be one campus, right?
Oh, I'm sorry. No, it's a high school program.
It's a high school.
It's a high school program, yeah. SMU develops it.
I got
and
you.
TI Foundation funds it, but it runs through the engineering program at SMU because they're very interested in this kind of concept of pulling these high school kids into their engineering programs and what it takes to get them interested and prepared to do that. And so they developed this course to kind of do that pulling into their engineering programs.
So SMU is administering this program for the TI Foundation at individual high schools, providing the curriculum to the high schools.
Right. Yeah. All right. I just have one more question.
Okay.
Are you confident that, and this is aside from the approval of the data, but are you confident that when you finish, I was trying to think of how you might get a representative sample out of this population, and I was trying to think of it through backing up through SMU, for example, and doing some kind of selection from there. But you're actually taking the people who actually select the course without making any discrimination by their qualifications other than these prerequisites. All right, so...
And an 8th grade tax score.
Yeah, so this will be non-random, non-representative, it'll be a propulsive kind of sample. All right.
And we'll have to speak to that and everything that we write up.
Are you taking the whole population, or?
Of students?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, so that it shouldn't be an issue if you're studying the whole population.
But in comparison to their rates of graduation, their rates of retention and grade, those kinds of things don't mean much unless they're within a context. So there will have to be some comparison to
Right.
another group, and that selection will have to be carefully done.
Oh, and is
Because
okay.
of the
Well,
self-selection
you
of the
can't-
course.
And the comparison is, the initial comparison is students with identical 8th grade performance on reading and math. And so So that's at least the group that we'll be comparing against. But, obviously, this selection issue is one.
Election's huge.
Yeah. If we can solve it
both
here, I'd be
studies.
happy. So.
And how many teachers will there be represented?
Well, the assertion is that there's only one teacher teaching it on each campus, each high school campus. So, like in this first year, we were able to find 22 teachers that were teaching it.
And we don't have student-teacher links for these campuses at the moment, and so we're not able to compare classroom by classroom. So it's going to be these students and all other students at that campus, for example, in that grade.
I'm sorry. So with the comparison group, then, are you going to match on certain variables, like?
Statistically control for.
Okay.
What type of training do the teachers go through for this particular curriculum?
My understanding is that they go to SMU for a week-long training program to learn the materials and get sample lesson plans and the hands-on demonstration of the materials as well. There's software that goes along with it.
So your end result may be a model to evaluate other programs that can be replicated, do you think?
I probably wouldn't lean on it that heavily.
I guess I wasn't really, as you spoke, but the dosage. I mean, is it one course, two course? How many courses are we talking about? Kind of representing the program. One
Elective credit,
is that one semester or one full year?
full year.
One full year.
Yeah,
Okay.
but it's up to that campus and that teacher to decide whether it's even used as a standalone course with just the curriculum they provide, or whether they use it as an augment course. And so Infinity was going to provide us that information, like how is the teacher actually using it.
Okay. Okay.
So when we come back in December of 2009, you already have the evaluation report, final evaluation?
That's the plan.
In 2009?
Yeah, that's the
If they
plan
pay
that we're
us.
going to.
Okay.
I move we accept the proposal.
Second.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? All right, and the second proposal is about AP and college readiness and the relationship between the two.
Do you want to? Sure.
This is a project for the O'Donnell Foundation. Several years ago, the NCEA did a project for them, which looks at the relationship between taking AP courses and taking the AP exam and/or passing the AP exam and success in college. And the O'Donnell as a starting point, the O'Donnell Foundation is interested in replicating that paper that was done by the NCEA. Now, clearly, this also has those sorts of selection effects involved in it, and also there's been by O'Donnell, what was AP Strategies and others, a push toward having more and more students take AP courses. So we have written the proposal so that it does that first thing, replicate this study or this paper that was done by NCEA, and there are lots of caveats in there about selection if you look at that paper. And the second, which there should be, and the second thing is to examine the issue a lot more carefully. And in particular, try to do a study, and this really hasn't been funded yet, or we're just in the process of talking with O'Donnell about this, but try to look at the effectiveness of the AP courses based on whether students are really prepared to take AP courses or not when they get to that point in high school, and maybe a lot more about what was actually in this AP course that was taught to this student and about the quality of the AP course that's actually being taught, and then looking at taking of AP exams and college preparedness based on AP. And so we've written the proposal somewhat generically, or that second part of the proposal somewhat generically, so that we can take it where we're able to take it if O'Donnell wants to go forward with that larger study. But the first one is just replicate that NCEA report Now, this is all dependent on getting AP test scores into the education research centers. And as Susan indicated, the coordinating board has funding to get those AP test scores, but the college board, the other CB, the college board, and the coordinating board don't yet have an agreement. So if Susan's looking at me with that daggers look, it's because she and I have probably weekly discussions about where are you on that contract today, and so we're working very hard to try to make that data available. But this will be dependent on getting that whole study will be dependent on getting that data into the education research center. Okay, so that's a little background. This is O'Donnell, and O'Donnell funded and O'Donnell initiated, really.
Question. The paper talks about college readiness, but we're talking about college graduation rates.
For the first phase, that's right.
The first phase, as well as the second. I was kind of going back to
College
it again.
attendance. Attendance.
Was it
just graduation?
Just graduation.
I think it's just, well, I don't know. What's here sounds like just graduation. Okay,
Yes.
but okay. And so I'm concerned about AP, any score, doesn't matter which, and graduation, because graduation is a long time
Right.
away, and there are many, many factors that contribute, to whether or not a kid will complete, their college. I mean, it's not bad, you can relate it, but I don't know how you disentangle. I mean, there are just so many other factors that come into play. They're not really kind of taken up here or discussed in any particular way. So I was just kind of wondering, did you need that? I mean, you can change it. I mean, the dependent variable is what it is, but I mean, I just was wondering, completing a first year, second year, third year, fourth year, because you follow all the years, would that work? As opposed to trying, even though those have problems as well.
So look at persistence in college, not just graduation as the only outcome.
Yeah.
Is what I'm hearing? Okay.
Well, I'm just asking. I don't want to necessarily change. I mean, I understand exactly what you have here. But there's stuff that's not here
Right.
that concerns me.
Yes, intentionally limited, but yes.
Mm-hmm.
One of the things I didn't quite understand was I was looking at your research questions on page 7, and I get number 1. I don't understand the distinction between number 2 and number 3. If you could explain to me a little bit about what are the kind of variables you're looking at, because the way, and I may be doing it wrong, but I read them and they sounded the same to me, that you're looking at, do students in AP graduate from college at higher rates than non-AP, controlling for the measured characteristics, and then I guess that's the part I missed, was do high schools with a higher percentage of students
Right.
okay, that was the part, because I kept reading it the same way, and I just now, reading it out loud, I figured out the difference. So, reading it silently, I was reading it too fast.
That was the perfect question that answered itself.
It
right?
did. So number 2 is looking at students, number 3 is looking at schools, and looking at the effects on the campuses. Okay, I got it. The other one that, and I think I, again, read quickly in here, was at first when I started reading it, you were talking about AP, but it seemed just very generic AP, that it could really be any AP. But then I think I saw one line in here where you were actually looking at the core courses. So you're really going to be limiting, because that was the thing. Until I got to that one sentence, I kept thinking, well, what if the student takes, AP Spanish, any of the AP languages or AP music or any of the other ones, how could you say that really affects their college? But you are limiting it to the AP core courses.
Right.
Okay.
You've got a lot of different factors here that I don't know how you're going to separate it all. I'll give you Harlingen as an example. We have TSDC. So you've got an associate's degree that most students will pursue versus going to a 4-year higher education. So I don't know how you're going to work that in as to determining the success of AP courses and then those students going on and going to a two-year school versus a four-year school. The other thing is, in our district, we've noticed in our AP results have gone down because of dual credit. We have a lot of students that are taking distance education and actually working with TSDC in Harlingen to get the dual credit. So we've noticed our AP results going down versus going up. So I don't know how you're going to work all these factors into, and you also mentioned that that just taking an AP course does not indicate as much success for college as the actual score on the AP test, and I agree with that because we're pushing more students to take the AP test to begin with. So a lot of those students probably will not do well in a four-year institution, whereas they might do well in a two-year. So I don't know how you're going to work all that in.
It might have been buried somewhere, but it certainly was our intention to look at associate's and bachelor's degree as a terminal outcome kind of thing. So we will include that. Since we have that full range of data for the public universities in Texas, that we will look at two-year and four-year institutions.
So your end results will incorporate that into.
Yeah.
But this is not a proposal for a major academic study.
Okay.
This is strictly replicating what was done earlier.
Well, and extending.
Yes.
Right.
Okay.
It will open the door. It will open the door to ask a lot more of those questions. We're hoping that O'Donnell will say, the O'Donnell Foundation will say, yeah, we really need to know the rest of those answers.
Yeah, I agree. Right.
Yeah, I actually like this study a lot, too. I like both of these studies. You know, one of the things that reading this made me think about, and you all are probably aware of the fact there have been a lot of recent studies coming out, especially in higher ed, talking about grades and how little grades mean in our school systems in terms of teachers feel pressure to give grades even when students haven't mastered the content. And what this study made me think about was whether or not students really have reached mastery sometimes in these AP classes, and whether their grades really reflect that mastery of the content, or whether the grades are somewhat inflated, and if they were really graded based on mastery of the content, would they be passing the AP classes? And my guess is many of them probably would. And I think we have a lot of grade inflation in our public schools. So I think this opens up a lot of questions and issues ultimately to be thought about.
Agreed.
There's a couple.
Oh, go ahead, Tim.
There were a couple things that I saw that you might want to consider. As Don mentioned earlier, with the Infinity program, dosage is going to have an effect because there may be kids that just take one AP course for math, and other kids that take it for all the foundational courses. So you're going to have to look at those kinds of differences because that's a selection effect also. And then there are some districts that require students who take AP courses to take the test, and even some districts that have required students to take it 1 year and not the next year. So those kinds of changes, I don't know how you identify those kinds of changes, but those kinds of changes you might want to consider taking those into effect. But I like the study. So.
And the other thing is, in that same line, is I assume you're also going to look, since I'm assuming will be in the data, kids who are taking the test that they're actually taking the course. Because we do have kids who take AP tests who do not take the AP course.
Yeah, I think that was actually one of the categories that Doherty looked at was exam takers that weren't course takers.
That weren't course takers, because
Yeah.
we do have a number of those. And I think I did see in here that you are going to take into consideration, we talked about dual credit, but also IB. That if you're using as a comparison group the non-AP students, you want to make sure that IB takers are not in that non-AP students, because obviously IB takers are not going to be like your other, they're going to be more like your AP students.
And we can dig that out of the PEIMS course codes then?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Because we've got several high schools in our district that are pretty much solely focused on IB and not AP. And so you wouldn't want those kids
In your control.
muddling up your non-AP sample.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed?
All right, I have a job to do.
You have some work now. Thank you.
And this economy was like, oh, good.
And let's see, we had consideration of any other procedures, which we don't have any that I know of. Any other comments? And are there any other questions?
Next meeting, date?
Next meeting date, let's see, this is June, be September.
Yep.
We should probably give the board a brief update as to progress we made since the last meeting.
That'd be
Both
good.
the coordinating board and TEA have been doing a terrific job of producing, in spite of the time constraints based on the legislative session for them, have been doing a terrific job. Greg and Jim and Susan and their staffs are providing additional data. We now have TOS data back to 94, 95 or so, and are pushing the data back and back and back and back. So from the agency data perspective, we're adding a lot to the education research centers. This gives us lets us capitalize on Texas's strength, that long panel, and so the research that. Even the research proposals that have been previously approved will take advantage of some of the length of that panel as well. And so we continue, each of the education research centers, speak for yourselves, continue to make progress in making that data available to researchers. We have the Ray Marshall Center for us is up and running remotely, and we have other contracts that have been signed at this point, and they're
UT San Antonio
UT
has
San
now been
Antonio has
signed.
just completed, for example, the Center for they're called IDSR, whatever that is for anyway, and the state data center, and so we're continuing to march down those paths as well. So the education research centers are now gaining. I think they're gaining what you might call that critical mass of research using the education research centers, and the initial projects are really beginning to take off at the centers as well. So, need to add?
Is the support for the research centers stable?
We have a Gates grant. We got no funding from the legislature. Not much got funded from the legislature this time. We have the Gates Foundation funding for this year and next year. So we had 2 years of Gates Foundation, and then after that, it's each of the centers is going to have to be self-supporting and supporting actually the data here and that sort of thing. We are looking for some other sources, and we've got some leads as far as we're going to be using some of the data for some other endowment grants that we have, and so we will offset some of that cost using that the endowments. But
Susan, could you remind me what the Gates is funding? I mean,
the Gates is funding. They're funding a position at TEA and a position at the coordinating board that basically getting the data to the ERCs. They're funding getting the AP data and the College Board data, TWC, which is there's no cost at this point to it. They're funding the Data Fellows program, which is going on right now. They're funding the JAB, your travel, that sort of thing. They're also funding.
Some equipment, right? Did they?
No equipment. Well, there's the cost of data storage and, a server, that sort of thing. They're funding that for 2 years. They're funding a study looking at higher education data. TEA had gotten a Dell Foundation grant, I can't remember, to look at the TEA data and restructuring and that sort of thing. So we have an RFP that hopefully will be off my desk soon. It's off my desk. It's down into the catacombs of the foundation. Anyway, so to do this study to look at higher ed data, TEA and the coordinating board also got an IES grant. It was announced that will allow us, and the coordinating board part of it is to allow us to get the faculty student link. Right now, the data that we have only has here are the students and the number of hours they're taking. Here are the courses and the number of hours being generated. So we're in the process of redesigning and working with the institutions to get that linkage for the higher ed side, and TEA will be
K-12
doing
side.
that for the K-12 side.
Wow.
Susan, I don't remember right now if Texas decided to take the stimulus money or not take it. But
We took it.
Oh, good. Well, I know that Arnie Duncan in ED has really pushed using some of that money in Common Ed and Higher Ed for data issues. So is there any opportunity to use some of the stimulus money to support this? I'm just
The
curious.
K-12 got all the stimulus money. So I don't know, I mean, higher ed side, yeah, last year. I mean, there was 3.2 billion, a bunch
Yeah.
that went to K-12. Higher ed, there were a few items in Article 12 that went to higher ed. I think we got about 300,000 or 300 million. I don't know.
Zeros
Not-
mean
That's
nothing.
a different little difference.
It's all relative, y'all. It's all relative. So, but the majority of it went to, I think, the textbook fund and
Okay.
basically offsetting GR. We got some for incentive funding. It was very specific the way it's allocated. There is some more IES grant money that will be coming through the stimulus. Last time I looked on the website, it was about a week ago. The proposal had not been put up there yet to be able to look at it. So, you know, we're still watching that, but
Yeah.
at this point, you know, our big focus right now is the IES grant we just got and how to get all of that done and have the institutions start submitting that new data. And obviously that's going to do a rework of all of our data, which we'll have to be keeping y'all informed of what that change is going to mean. But one of the things that we'll be getting is we'll be getting the students, we'll be getting their grades in the courses and all of that with that IES data. So that'll be for the higher ed, that, I mean, everybody here is really excited about that. We've been saying for a long time, if we just knew how they did in this course, and that's one of the studies, I'm sure a lot of y'all have been hearing about the dual credit issues and that sort of thing, and that's one of the studies that we're really looking forward to. And we're going to actually be doing a dual credit study with our San Antonio Pathways project, which gives us all of the student-teacher links in high schools all the way through the university there. And we'll be doing a study with Alamo Community College, actually, looking at their dual credit students, how they did in dual credit, how they did in the second course, and that sort of thing. But that's a study that the coordinating board's doing, using the Pathways data.
Will you be able to make those student-teacher links available to the ERC?
We cannot, the way the MOU is written with Pathways, we cannot do that. Now, when we get the IES data, that will all feed into the ERCs. But the way the Pathways is set up, it is designed for use at the local level only. And that's the way we got that, because that is a voluntary effort. Now, there is one that's being funded by the Houston Endowment in Houston, which will include HISD, Houston Community College, San Jac. Actually, there's 6 ISDs. Houston, Spring Branch, North Forest, Pasadena. Remember the other 2? Anyway, 6 school districts down there, 2 community college districts, Houston Community College, San Jac Community College, Houston, U of H downtown, and U of H Clear Lake will all be participating in a Pathways project down in Houston, funded by the Houston Endowment. And so that's another thing that's being kicked off, and actually Houston Community College is the grantee for that one. So we're working on that, which will give us some, and then we're also working on another one in El Paso,
Yeah.
doing a Pathways project in El Paso at the request of Senator Shapley.
And
So there's no funding for that one. We get to eat the cost, you know, when it's a
So
legislative request, we just eat the cost.
So the original $1 million is a one-time
It was a one-time funding.
to each camp. Now, what is the relationship between funding and the number of proposals that we're receiving?
I don't know that there is a relationship.
No.
They were each funded the $1 million as startup, and then they can submit as many proposals as they can go out and get funding for.
Yeah. But if there were funding available from the state,
And I will say now, that, and this may be a little, I know Jim just put out a request to the ERCs that they have a proposal that they need a study done. Please give us a bid on that
Yeah.
from each of the ERCs, and the state will fund that based on that. We've put some things out that we've said, we need this done. Give us the proposal, or put out a proposal, that sort of thing. So we do try to give funding
Great.
where possible, where we have money to give and do any study. We'd rather give it to the ERCs than,
Yeah, the legislature passed several bills that directed the commissioner to have the ERC do a study. So the only way that the commissioner can direct, either of the commissioners can direct an ERC to do a study, is to also provide funding. So these studies that were in legislation are going to be going to the ERCs with funding. So it's an indirect way of.
it's not a direct funding to the ERCs.
Right. It's for the
for a
to conduct
specific
an evaluation or study.
So,
Yeah, and the IES grant, I wanted to say from a K-12 side, we'll be able to put a student in a classroom, we'll be able to put a teacher, the goal is to put a teacher in the classroom, and then to know what that class is more specifically than we can right now, and then also know from a course completion standpoint whether or not that student completed it, and not just, right now we only have 9 through 12 course completion data. So we're talking about being able to know that a student in second grade completed courses, all of his or her courses, and that will allow us to look at things like the impact of not completing courses on dropout later on, and lots of different things that from a state we need to know and need to be able to monitor that we can't do now because we don't have those data.
how much will you actually be able to include background data on the teachers?
Right now, we have their certification data that's part of the
part
State
of the
Board of
ERC.
Educators certification. We have those data in the data warehouse, and we're going back in time, back into the 1950s, I think is the oldest data we have. So we're putting that data in. We've got all the information in PEAMS on teachers, their demographic information, their salaries, and then we'll have the higher ed data for where they went to school.
as long as they went to school in Texas.
Right, as they went to school in Texas, where they got their where they got their degree, where they got their certificate issued, whether they went through an alternative certification program or a traditional. We'll know all of that.
Their test score.
Their test score for their certificate.
For certificate.
And how many times they had to take it in order to pass. Things like that.
So you'll actually potentially be able to look at teacher effectiveness.
Yes.
Is that the intent?
That's one of the questions that will be examined, I'm sure, extensively.
I'm sure.
Yeah, the key that's been missing is putting the student in the teacher's classroom, and we've been working with school districts, Houston in particular, and done several papers on teacher effectiveness using data from large Texas school districts already. It's going to be very valuable when this data is collected. We'll actually be ahead of Florida and ahead of Florida and North Carolina. So, yeah.
What time frame are we looking at?
IES is a 5-year grant.
Yeah. And I don't know when we'll actually start collecting it from the districts.
And we have it that we'll start collecting in, actually June of 2011 will be the first time we collect the higher ed data. We'll do some testing before that, and then the higher ed data will start being collected.
And the K through 12 student-teacher linked data, when will that start rolling in?
And the what?
The teacher-student linked data for pre-K through 12. When do you expect that?
I don't know the date yet. I haven't heard.
Whenever it comes, it'll go to the ERC warehouse, right?
Yes.
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
All of the data for both sides, when it comes, will go
Absolutely.
into the ERC warehouse.
That's a very important piece of information. I liken it to knowing that a patient went into a hospital and that some percentage of the patients came out of the hospital and some didn't. But we don't know what happened to them while they were in the hospital. That's currently somewhat what we have in the education system. Is we have students that go in, some of them come out, some of them don't, but we don't know what happened to them while they were there, and this provides us that ability to know that what
Little bit
happened to
more.
them while they were in the system.
Yeah, you have teachers who go in and come out as well. And teachers,
And why they, yeah.
and
And I
teachers who
mean,
go from one hospital to another.
Right.
Exactly. Jim?
and right now, I mean, our teachers stay on average, 5 years?
You were talking about data going to an ERC warehouse. Are we talking about 1 or 3? Or how?
There's
how,
3.
How,
It'd be a-
there's 3.
It would go to the master data warehouse and then would
And
be
then
replicated.
it gets pulled down
Right.
Right.
to you guys.
Right.
Goes to Greg.
Goes to Greg. Greg's the keeper. No. He de-identifies all of it.
I'd like to hear what A&M and UT
UT Austin.
are also doing.
Want to go ahead?
Okay. UT Austin is still working on this. We do have the server all set up, and we have downloaded some of the data. And we do have our client computers. We're still struggling a little on getting those accessible to us. And then I think the first computer will go out to Texas State because they have some projects they're wanting to, start working on. Amazingly enough, it's down to waiting on a lock for the door at UT. So very soon we're going to actually be able to access it, and we have hired a half-time database manager, which is very helpful. And UT is supporting some of the server maintenance and all of that. So we are almost there.
And I know we approved some studies out of your institution,
Yes.
so are those still on hold until they can get access to this data, or are they
Yeah,
moving?
and technically, I can speak. The UTeach Engineering. This is the first summer of the program of looking at the teachers. So technically, we don't even know. We haven't had to access the data yet for that one. As far as the Houston one, it would be nice. Right now, we're combing through AEIS data, just identifying campuses. So it hasn't held those two behind. But certainly the original ones when Ruben, and the original money coming, those are the ones that are.
Michael.
Oh, and that was another thing. Michael Martyr, who was on the UTeach Engineering, had a project that he was working on, and because it wasn't available through us yet, he went to UT Dallas.
Okay.
So that worked out very nicely.
Him?
Oh, gosh.
Shouldn't have let
I
opened that up.
You hear too much from me. We had, I think we had 14 people last September 1st, and we expect to have 32 people on our center on this September 1st, where we've added, and Jim's going to generate enough revenue for everybody. So. We have lots of projects going on in the Texas School Project, and then I think we have 11 or something approved, 11 approved JAB projects that we're working on as well. We've translated, standardized all the data we've gotten from coordinating board as of up until yesterday, and we have the data available in SAS and Stata and SPSS, and as I mentioned, the remote access continues to grow. We're talking with the University of Houston and NCEA is just about ready. Their contract's just about done, and a couple of several other places. North Texas has an interest in access, and we're beginning to expand access. The passing of this charge schedule is important. It gives me a good opportunity to start charging people starting September 1st, our fiscal year, and so we're planning on charging people who can afford it, for using the data and access at the center. So in addition to grants, we'll be generating some revenue from users of the data. Lots more. So.
Don't forget the new
new website?
Oh gosh, we launched the new website this week. I was not in the office, but they even had cookies. What can I say? No, we have a half-time communications person who's working with us. We've hired a data manager who's familiar with relational databases, and we're starting to expand the technological infrastructure. We've installed a Cray computer as our server, and we have all new hardware. Essentially, we spent about several $100,000 on hardware over the last few months. Makes me sweat thinking about it. Sorry, etc. So we're making at UT Dallas we're making a lot of progress, but we're also working in conjunction with the other centers. We've done a lot on policies and procedures and processes, and the word's beginning to spread. My expectation is you'll see a lot more proposals in the September meeting than we had this time, as people are beginning to realize that, hey, this is a good idea. Let's relieve some of the burden to the agencies for asking for data, and let's figure out how to work in conjunction with this data.
And I was going to add that UT Dallas has been very gracious in helping us try and get this thing going. And I guess last week we even had our database manager go visit them, and it was very helpful.
We're going to start charging them in September.
Yeah.
It wasn't
It's a threat.
At A&M, I think we've completed about half of our initial projects, and we've had several presentations on them, and I hope most of you get our newsletter where you've seen some of the presentations on those. We have a number of new funded projects that have helped supporting the center. We're also now encouraging interns. So we have a number of doctoral students across the university who serve as interns on the center. And I think the fee structure, the approval of that is going to help us immensely, because now we can advertise it, and I think we're going to get a large number of faculty and or students who are going to be interested in using the data warehouse.
And by the way, all of us have been involved in conferences around the country, and here in Texas we'll be presenting at the TASA Texas Assessment Conference in December, for example, and beginning to Hirsch's lead in some cases, in all of ours, we're beginning to spread the word to people around the state at universities and around the country, really. We've been to California and Washington, D.C., and et cetera.
Absolutely.
Chicago.
Yeah, there's a lot of interest in finding out what we're doing in Texas, and how is it that we're dealing with the FERPA issue and the Joint Advisory Board's relationship, the relationship between the Joint Advisory Board and the ERCs, and a lot of interest.
Yeah, it was interesting, in fact, talking with the people at the Chicago Center for School Research, CCSR, who, they're going to be the Secretary of Education and the person in charge of IES are both coming from that spot, and we got a chance to review their data stores and their data issues and their FERPA compliance. It was eye-opening for all of us, probably. We can probably do that maybe for the next Joint Advisory Board meeting. We have another topic that Nidhi's bringing up, and that is that the ERCs have an obligation to review research output, and so any research reports or data or summary data that comes out of the ERCs has to be reviewed for FERPA compliance. This is a major issue in that as the volume of these things grows and people are looking at computer logs or not only reports that get published or whatever, which wouldn't be maybe so difficult because usually most decent researchers are summarizing their stuff, but we're working on procedures to actually make that happen. We have two people that we've authorized to review, Greg Branch and Nidhi, who we've authorized to review such output, but we're trying to write the procedures for actually doing that and thinking along the lines of, just to put a thought in your head so you can give us some advice in the next meeting, of we're archiving all of the output that goes to researchers, a copy of that, and thinking of auditing it, and auditing, in the case of files, auditing the code that's used to produce the file so that we check it for FERPA compliance. But this is a major issue that we're wrestling with at the moment. NITI's doing a great job so far, but the volume is growing.
Yeah, at this point, I think I'm being perhaps excessive in the sense that, I look at each and every research document, each and every cell, but really in the last month, these outputs have exploded. We have, the number of items I've reviewed in the last few weeks is really a fairly long list, and I log everything. But over time, it would be nice if we came up with some procedure that was a little more reasonable. I really think I'm erring right now on the side of being, like I said, excessive. But if with your guidance, we can, probably streamline the process. Like if a researcher needs to take a log file out, they have to depend on me to approve it before they can take it out, which makes life very difficult for them. And they do sign basically their life away before we give them the data. I mean, you should see everything we make them sign. That they understand
Access to the data.
to get access to the data, right? That they understand the rules for masking, they've read this, all the relevant JAB policies, that they understand it and they will implement it, that they are never going to take any confidential data out, they understand the rules of FERPA, they will abide. So all of those, they have already agreed to and signed off. But that's why I think right now, I'm erring on the side of, probably being excessive. So maybe next time we discuss it, we can get your guidance on being a little more reasonable about how to do this.
I know at the coordinating board, it has been a major issue for us. I mean, we have people that they come and they have used what we called before now the jailed PC, which is a PC that has no outporting, just goes to a server and they can do research. And yeah, when they want to take a file out, I have to have somebody from my staff that goes in and reviews the file and makes sure, and then they can release the data at that point to the researcher. And it is a very time-consuming effort.
And do you have policy written up for coordinating board on that? Because that might be a
We
nice
have what they
starting
look for. I mean, and it's basically written into the rules. They can't be cells of less than
Right.
5 or derived less than 5 to where you can identify the student. I mean, and there's a lot of different ways. We will tell them to roll up their data, and they can roll it in multiple different ways. They can roll it up by combining, like if you're doing high school to college and you're saying they go to college somewhere in the state versus they go to this college, you could release a lot more data if they're going to somewhere in the state versus they're going from this high school to this college. Makes them a lot more identifiable than this high school to college in Texas.
So you have those guidelines already written
We
up?
have some of those written up, and we can share those. But there's that sort of thing that it just takes somebody sitting down and looking at it, because you can do an automatic mask of cells less than 5, but if you put a total out there, you can derive that number. So you have to also mask the next number, and so it's a very time-consuming process.
And I was wondering if you have the policy for this also, but even just the method, because we had a graduate student that sat in your jail computer room for a while, and he said that basically there was an output file that he put the output in that you all had access to, and then you could email the file to him when
After it was
approved.
already approved, yes.
Because, and we're, figuring that out as well, since we aren't allowed to have any flash drive or thumb drives download anything. But some of the data, I mean, the output's huge. I mean,
Yeah,
it's got to
it
be.
is.
So is that always going to be workable, I guess?
That's what we've done at this point. We haven't figured out a silver bullet to make that easier at this point.
Okay.
So right at this point, I have somebody that goes in and reviews. And if it's a big file, sometimes I have 2 people, because your eyes start to glaze over at a certain point.
We've looked for automated methods for doing it and haven't found one that works for lots of different kinds of output. If it's a very consistent output, then we've got a relatively stable algorithm for doing that, but
And TEA tends to do one other thing is they will not give any totals. So that you can have the numbers across and mask this one, but you have no total number. So you don't.
you can't derive.
So that way you can't derive. And that does take some of the burden off. Two
But if
ways
you're-
of doing
but
the
if you're
same
running
thing.
SAS
It's just
code,
different.
do it any way you wanted to generate output.
Right.
So the only way I know of for verifying that it's FERPA compliant is to go through a very manual, laborious process.
That's what I do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We've both been there, done that.
Yep.
It's not fun.
Next JAB meeting, if we have this on the agenda, I can come up with, whatever procedures and policies we have in place, so we can, briefly discuss it, and we can get your
That
blessings.
sounds great.
Well, we'll need to have the attorneys.
Yeah,
look
the
at
attorneys have to look
because
at this
it has
one,
to be
too.
FERPA compliant. It's not the JAB's.
Yeah, the FERPA compliant part
authority to
is-
override FERPA.
We have attorneys that look at that on a, I mean, we inundate our,
Do it in a way that would certainly be compliant with whatever rules we've been given. Within that, I was not planning to be.
yeah, we haven't figured it out, and maybe with everybody talking about it, we can figure out a better way of doing it, because I know it is very, when I assign that to somebody, they just look at me like,
What did I do wrong?
it's like, I have seen that look, and I've done it myself when they're not available. I've gone through and looked at, and it's not a fun process, y'all. I don't know what to tell you.
Maybe we should add a charge, for output, volume of output, based on volume of output.
And you could do that.
It sounds
Because
like
it is a
reasonable-
very time-consuming effort to go
You might
through
want to
and.
consider that, because we're actually going to have to fund people to do this.
Right, I was
Yeah.
You will.
because I do many other things, and I don't mind. Doing it, but sometimes time
Sometimes
constraint
it-
is severe. People need it the next day or the same evening. They have to leave everything aside and just do that.
Yeah, and obviously, we don't have not charged people to use our gel PC, so one of the things that we have told them is, we will get to it as soon as we can, but we cannot guarantee that you will get your results the next day. That's just, especially when they're here during the session, it's like, oh, sorry.
This goes to a general point that I was concerned with when we were looking at pricing initially, that you know your costs, you really do know your costs, so that when
You know
you're
where
asked,
your costs are.
Yeah, because you may be, subsidizing something that you cannot afford to subsidize. I do care about whether or not you can make this, viable, but people really do need to understand the real costs of, having access to this kind of information, what it entails, and what they're getting.
It's my understanding on this fee schedule that this is basically a starting point, that we're using this in order to have a fee schedule in place that we can use, but it certainly isn't based at this point on a rigorous evaluation of our costs for doing this. We haven't done enough of it yet.
Yeah. I will say we spent the better part of this last 2 years trying to help IES understand the costs associated with doing randomized control trials, depending on the type of methodology. And they asked us a lot of questions. You would think that they may know, but really, there still is a lot of art to it. But I think it's the only way they can begin now to evaluate a proposal for a large research study. Because up until now, they've not really been able to say what's a reasonable cost for any particular aspect of doing a very large, RCT. So I would say it's going to take a little while, but I think we need to just be diligent about it, because I think those are going to be real costs.
I know that one will be a real cost, because we have no reimbursement. That just comes out of my regular staff time.
Yeah.
To have people do that, just as it does for UT Dallas, and it is a cost.
It is.
There is a cost associated with that, as far as what else is not going to get done or what is going to get done
Exactly right.
after 5 or 10 or whatever. So, any other questions, or
That's good.
I guess I'll take a motion for adjournment.
So moved.
So move, second. All in favor? Everybody goes, yeah! Thank you
all
very
again
much.
for coming.
Thank you. I just deferred it.
We launched our new website.